Morning. Oops.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning.
How is everybody?
Good.
Good.
We need to figure out how to change the titles on because we've got to switch
The
everybody.
default.
Do we know how to do that? Let's see.
You should know by now not to ask me these things.
I believe you can change those when you're doing the login screen. When you click on the link, you should have where it asks you to enter the email. Does everyone have to enter in an email when you log in and join the meeting?
But it just says just put your name.
I think there's another field down below where it says put your name, and I think you can update it there.
I did it. So do you see like those two blue boxes when you kind of put your cursor over your picture, your photo?
Yeah. The three dots.
Yeah.
The box with the three dots, it should be in the upper right-hand corner.
And then click rename, and then you can type in your new name.
See, what should we be? What should we be today?
Oh, chaos ensues, Chair.
Woo, what should we be? Possibilities are endless. Okay, there we go. We're all set.
Okay, so let's see, it's 10:01. So I'm going to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, January 13th, 2022, formal informal session. And let's see, Ken, would you do us the honors of saying the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And that brings us to our calendar session. I have a couple notes on here. So there's a planning commission meeting tonight at 6:30. I think it's a pretty big one. I don't know if any commissioners are planning to go, but it is at the Dayton Community Center tonight at 6:30. So just in case. And then it looks like we have the Yamhill County Board of Health ad hoc meeting scheduled for January 19th, which I believe is Wednesday, and that starts at 10:30 a.m. and that will be a virtual meeting. Commissioners, did you have anything else for calendar?
No, I was just emailing back and forth with Ken about making it available for folks to see it. And we have a YouTube channel, but Health and Human Services, the different departments, I guess, don't have one. So would we put out the link that has the Teams meeting on it for people to just watch?
That's what's already on the agenda that was posted for the Board of Health meeting. They have an access for both viewing or calling in and listening. You have those two options that are on the agenda. So the meeting is essentially being live streamed through the Teams, the virtual platform.
Okay, that's easier than what I thought. Anyway, thank you for that.
And then
Okay.
Chair. Oh,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kula.
Yeah, I have that we will be, or those of us who choose to join the appointment to replace Senator Johnson tomorrow, which of course that's not possible to replace her, but for the seat. And then I've got Judge Collins' retirement next Friday on my calendar.
That's right.
And then I have, I'm hosting at the request of, or I'm organizing at the request of the US Senators staff, 3 Friday housing tours in a row. So I will get you the information in case either of you would like to attend. The first one will be at the Mission space this Friday at 4 p.m. So I'll just send the list to Carolina. And then the next one will start at 9 a.m. next Friday morning.
Okay. Sounds great. And then Carolina, she has all the information for tomorrow, but it starts at 9:30, I think, the Betsy Johnson replacement, and it's all virtual. So, okay, anybody else calendar issues? No? Okay. We're going to move on to public comment. We did receive some public comment this morning, so thank you, Carolina, for sending that over. And just a reminder, we do accept and are continuing to accept public comment via mail or email, and those instructions are on our website. Moving on to department updates. Ken, you have an update on the Oracle Cloud implementation project, so I will hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. So I have Mike Barnhart and Justin Hogue also joining. I'm going to be doing this presentation, and I have some slides, a slideshow that I'm going to go through here really quickly. So I'll just need a moment to make sure I can share everything. All right, so doing a quick a quick run through. Can everyone see the presentation? And make sure. And did it switch screens? Great. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure that there's no technical issues as I go through this. So thank you very much. We thought this would be an appropriate time because staff is working very diligently in implementing our Oracle Cloud ERP project. And just a reminder, this is also known as our GEMS replacement project. This is a complete update or replacement of our central finance system and the software that we use that operates a lot of various functions throughout the county and in our operations. So for the first slide here is just a little bit of background. I know you know the board is aware of how we got here, but the current system, GEMS, has been in use since 1996. It has served us well over the years, but it is we're due for a replacement. There's a lot of technology improvements, and there's a lot of things that the system doesn't do that we wished it did, and we're also looking at some process improvements. The county, we began reserving funds for a replacement system since fiscal year 15-16 is when we started setting aside funds and had this identified as a priority project. We did an RFP process in 2020, and we've been working with Barry Dunn for both doing the planning leading up to releasing an RFP. And then they also assisted with doing the RFP and selecting the vendor, and they're also continuing to assist us with project management and project implementation. This is again, it'd be an understatement. This is a significant endeavor to replace the system because we're having to do both. We're currently still using our old system while we're building and getting ready to learn this new system. And of course, we can't just stop operations. We can't stop payroll, HR, AP, AR, a lot of these functions. So it's a huge undertaking. We did an RFP in 2021, and we selected Graviton, which is an Oracle Cloud product. It came out, and the board's aware it was approved before. The criteria that was used and everything, and why we selected Oracle Cloud and went this direction. And then we actually started the project in September of last year. And, the key folks that I really want to highlight is we have various project teams related to the project, but I want to take time and really highlight our project management team, which is Mike Barnhart, our finance manager, Jennifer Elkins, who's our deputy finance manager, Justin Hogue, our business services director, Shane Hoffman, our IT director, and Patricia Rojas, our HR manager, who just joined us here recently. We've been getting her trained up, and we have her on the project management team. And then I'm on the project management team as well. So we work really closely with Barry Dunn in overseeing the project and the various committees and how this is rolling out. So our objectives, like I said before, is implement a modern ERP system, and also we're looking at some business process changes that will allow us to deploy effective tools that increase efficiency of finance in our HR office operations throughout the county. The system is intended to be a full-featured, user-friendly software to reduce current reliance on manual or third-party systems and workarounds. Is to provide us improved access to data, more robust and accurate reporting for management staff, and also for the public-facing information as well, as also incorporated in this project. Implement technology and process changes that will allow a centralized oversight roles to focus more on strategic analysis and duties and less on data entry and exporting. And I could probably go into more detail about the current system and kind of what we go through as far as something as simple as reviewing and approving an invoice for payment and all the paper and the steps that we go through. That's not something that our current system, it's not built into our system. So that's an easy example of where we're going to see some process improvements. And this has really come to light, the limitations with our current system has really come to light with the pandemic and remote work, and we have a lot less in-person interactions. Well, that our current system doesn't support that very well, because we have a lot of paper that's coming from departments to accounting through my office that still requires signatures and approvals. And this new system, that's all going to be electronic, and we'll have the ability to track processes, have security protocols in place. We're really excited about a lot of the elements that are going to be rolled out in this system. Again, enhanced interfaces between HR and payroll modules. Right now, our current platform is strictly payroll modules. It doesn't have the HR functions. So a lot of times you may have some inefficiencies that HR is collecting forms and information, and something as simple as a timesheet, that's still being done on paper. And then we put that over, and then accounting has to input all that information into the payroll system. This new system, that's going to be streamlined, and we're going to have these modules that are built in that the HR system will directly interface with the payroll system. Again, improved efficiencies. We're also seeing as an objective is to improve our service delivery and access to information for employees, citizens, business owners, including online self-service capabilities. We're going to be looking at going to electronic timesheets. We're going to be looking at vendors being able to send invoices electronically, being able to submit W-9s or updates electronically. Again, that's going to substantially reduce the amount of paper that we have that goes through our finance office. Partner with a vendor that provides quality support and training services to maximize the use of the system. This is another thing, an important element for the project that we're rolling out that we don't have with GEMS. When we have a new employee who comes in, whether that's an accounting clerk or someone in finance or even an HR manager, we don't have a training program for GEMS, and we will have that with Oracle. So when we have a new employee who comes in, we actually have an orientation and a developed training program to get them more accustomed instead of just kind of learning on the job and learning how to use the system efficiently. And again, our other big objective, because again, we're a large organization and there's a lot of needs, is making sure we're engaging with our stakeholders from all the county departments, and we're getting their input all through this process, even through the development of the RFP and the planning for that. We were having communications with all the departments on what improvements needed to happen, how we could streamline our processes to make sure they're able to function. So as far as our implementation phasing right now, So we have three different elements, and there's some acronyms in here. I'm not going to try to butcher the acronyms. The ERP is essentially the finance system. The EPM is our budget system, and the HCM is our HR component. So we have three different components that are being rolled out at the same time. Again, we've really started with the financial portion of it, and you can see that we kicked that off in September. And then if you look at this chart, you'll see that starting in December and January, we've initiated working on the HR component of it. These are going to be running in parallel to each other. And then once we get into June, then we're going to start building the budget modules. So this year, like I mentioned, when we had the work session on the budget instructions, this is going to be the last year that we're going to use the current system GEMS for building budgets for the next fiscal year. When we start this time in next year in 2023, we anticipate that Oracle is going to be fully up and operating, and we'll be building budgets when we go live with that in January of next year. So to get into a little more detail on what the process looks like, and at this point, I'm only talking about the finance system. This is what we're working on here, but all of the three categories that I talked about are going to have a similar implementation, design and implementation process. So we're working on a plan. We do we have to get Oracle and our Graviton and Barry Dunn. We need to get them up to speed on our business processes. And then we're trying to do some customization within the system, but then also trying to realign and make some process improvements to make sure that the system's capable, so there's a lot of planning and discussions that take place. And how this looks like is we have various stakeholder groups, and I highlighted the project management team, but I should also highlight that it's a much larger endeavor. We have accounting clerks, our business managers, our office managers, our department heads. We have stakeholders that have a role in each of these projects from a day-to-day operational standpoint that are participating in these programs and are able to provide input and feedback on, well, how does this work? How can we improve this? What we're doing right now and how we want to move forward. So as part of this, we went through a design and we did a series of meetings, what we call CRP meetings, which is the conference room pilot one. We did a whole series of meetings in November and into December to where the Graviton team that are doing the design work are doing presentations to show us what the system looks like. The intent is to solicit our feedback, provide input on what we'd like to see if we can change, what may be able to be customized, or if it's something that's built into Oracle that we can't necessarily do a customization, we can at least have a discussion, well, how can we improve our internal processes to make sure we align with that system? So they started a very high level in the CRP1 presentations, and they're able to run through that and provide examples, solicit that feedback. Then the design team, the Graviton team, takes that feedback and information. At the same time, they're taking a lot of our data out of our current system, doing a conversion and loading it in. So then when we get into the CRP2 sessions, which is another round of similar meetings, but we're starting to see more of our Yamhill County's data in the system. And we're able to run through test scenarios on, okay, we're going to process, like for accounts payable, we're going to process an invoice. And so we'll run it all the way through the approval processes, and we all take turns and logging into the system at various steps in the process and seeing how it works and if we have questions. So again, you can see the line where we're at. We finished the CRP1s and we're getting ready to kick off next month with the CRP2s for the finance system. And so again, when you look back at the other chart, we're looking at going live with many of the finance components in June. So come July 1, we're going to be using Oracle for processing accounts payable, accounts receivable, a lot of those functions. And we're also anticipating that it's going to be a little bit quicker timeline, but a similar timeline for the HR components. Any questions? I haven't been pausing, and I know I'm going through this presentation rather quickly. Yes, Commissioner.
Can the CEMLI cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, what is that?
I figured I was going to get that question, and I didn't print out the note. So essentially what that is, you know, when you look at the different categories, like under the design, you know, we have a series of meetings with Graviton and Barry Dunn. And when they go into the CEMLI, and maybe I'll throw it to Mike and he can tell you what that abbreviation is actually for, but that is where they take all of our input, they sit down with their design team and all the feedback that we've given, and they are implementing that. They go through all of that. They circle back with the stakeholders for clarification. We meet with the project management team. We say, yeah, we want to implement this change, or no, we're going to need to circle back and talk to the department that we may need to modify processes. Mike, did you want to add anything more?
Sure. Yeah, my mic is on there. CHEMLI, they just use the acronym CHEMLI, but it stands for, I think it's customization, extension, L is localization, I is integration. It's basically just technical language about programming the system to meet our needs. And they have these 5 groupings that they've kind of given the acronym for the first letter of each. So it's what Graviton does to Oracle in order to get the system to work the way we've asked them to make it work for us.
It's configuration, extension, modification, localization, and integration.
Thank you, Justin.
All right. Does that answer your question, Commissioner? I tried to give it at the really high level, but essentially, you know, again, you know, like Mike was describing, it's their acronyms that they use, but it's essentially taking all of our feedback and then going and applying that to the system. And because again, we're trying to make sure that it does match, you know, our process, you know, as closely as possible. But there are times that we may have to modify our process to match the system. It all depends on, you know, these discussions and the back and forth and the interaction that we have during all these meetings. So again, you know, as I mentioned before, when you look at the core financial timelines, overall, we kicked off the financials in September. And again, we're looking at a go live date in June of this year. But again, it's going to continue because it doesn't just stop that, hey, we went live with it and we don't see Graviton or Barry Dunn. You know, there's training, there's follow-up, there's making sure that we're doing system audits, that we have coverage, that if we're finding issues with the system, that we still have that support readily available to make those necessary changes. And this just, you know, I kind of went quick through the presentation. These are just some of the timing for that previous one. As I mentioned before, you know, the previous slide, the CRP1s, that was done in October, November, and into December. So we're on schedule. I think that's the biggest thing that I could share is, you know, we're working really hard at this, and we have a lot of county employees and a lot of staff that are engaged in this project, and it's not without its challenges. This is a very ambitious timeline in rolling this out because this is in addition to our day jobs, you know, so this is an additional project on top of everything else that all of our departments and offices are engaged in on a daily basis. This is in particular having, you know, the finance team, you know, because we can't stop payroll, we still have to pay bills, we still have audits, we still have budget process, yet, you know, Mike's staff is integral to everything related to this because this is what they do. So, you know, I really want to recognize the staff and the effort and the time that is being given to this. And, and just kind of highlight that it's not without its challenges. But I'm pleased to report that we're still continuing to be on schedule. And I'm not anticipating any further delays or, as we move forward, but it's not without its challenges. So again, this highlights where we're at right now when you look at this timeline for the implementation of the financials. And then again, what we're expecting as far as improvements when we go live and we replace GEMS, we're expecting improvements to our AP, reduction of paper. That's a big thing, to have a lot of our approvals and storage and our documentation being electronically, and how we interact. I like the example I shared before, that the department receives an invoice, they code it, they submit it. It may require a signature of the department head. It may require a secondary signature by the county administrator. Then it goes to accounting for process and payment as part of the check run. All of that is going to be electronic now. So we won't have such a reliance on inter-office mail and seeing all these invoices and the amount of paper. So we're definitely looking at some improvements there. Accounts receivable, again, we're looking at reducing our reliance on third-party solutions. We'll be able to have that in a fully integrated system. Bidding and contracting and RFPs, we're going to have modules there to help facilitate RFP processes, prepare standardized contracts. There's a lot of functions that we're currently looking at being able to build into this. So then we have consistency and improved efficiencies in how we handle that. Budgeting, this is going to be a big thing because, for me personally, as the budget officer, I'm really excited about, the interface with the system, because right now I have to customize a lot of reports and then convert those into Excel spreadsheets. So then I can do some analysis, maybe even prepare charts. A lot of that is going to be built into the system. And so it's going to be a huge time saver for me, and we'll be able to more readily get budgetary information and live information straight out of the system to have available to answer questions about particular funds or where we're at as far as the budget goes through the budget year. Improvements to the general ledger, improvements to procurement, and then also for projects and grants. There's all these elements are going to be built into this system to, again, help with that tracking, transparency, and making sure that all the necessary approvals are in place. What I would kind of call like a chain of evidence that this has been through the proper channels as far as process goes before we get to a point that we're actually physically writing a check, or we know if we get funds coming in that we have, that tracking on where the funds are being deposited. Mike, did you have anything else that you wanted to add or highlight in this area?
No, I think you've explained it really well. And the slide really shows some of the new capabilities we're going to have that we have not had. And I can't say enough how much less paper we're going to have. I mean, we've got a whole basement full of paper because that's our only method of storing documents right now. So the document imaging and the fact that, if an invoice comes in, it gets, just to look at the procurement process there, a department will enter a requisition, which will be then forwarded automatically to the supervisor for approval, which will be forwarded to a buyer to actually create a purchase order. And then we get to order the item. We have the approvals up front, electronically documented. There are no email approvals. There's not, manually, written things down. It's all going to be so auditable that we're going to have a lot more evidence in the system about how we came to the decisions to buy things. And I think that's super exciting.
Oh, yes, Commissioner.
One question about the, I don't have the wording in front of me, but in terms of streamlining the process with grants, could you just touch on that?
Well, it has a grant module that which we currently don't have in our system. So, and that applies, for when we apply for grants and tracking. Right now, we have to do a lot of workarounds or kind of hand entry. We get a grant for a project, and the department may have that grant agreement and that grant application on file, and then they are tracking their expenditures, and then they're handwriting the codes. They send it to accounting to cut the check, or making sure that, hey, we're paying this and it needs to be coded to this GL account. And so that's done in, separate from the system. In GEMS, we have the entries on the payment, but we don't necessarily have it all consolidated to where, and the current system will be able to go in there and have the information consolidated, the approvals, the specifics on what grant it's tied to. It's, instead of just relying on a project code and coding. And so that's what we're really looking at for the improvements. And I think there's more. Mike, you may want to share more if I missed something.
No, I think you pretty much hit it on the head. Right now, departments might code things, but then they have to run reports out of GEMS, summarize and massage all that data in an Excel file somewhere.
Right.
And then hopefully they've got it all reconciled and it agrees. In the new system, they'll still code things, but then those expenses for those projects will go to a project ledger where payroll will come in, invoices will come in. And then when they want to bill on that project, then it'll go to the accounts receivable module. So we can actually bill on those projects and then collect on those projects to see overall how a project is doing. How we receive the money on that, all those kind of compliance things. So it's really a one-stop shop for a project and for a grant that we've never had before.
And it really centralizes it, because I know in my previous experiences and with the grant projects that I may have been managing, it was on my desk. So I had my spreadsheets, I had my system, I was making sure I was tracking, I was, generating the reports to the granting agency. That was really, I had to rely on my spreadsheets and the information I had. By having it here in the system, now we're going to be able to run reports, and it's going to be more centralized, and it's going to provide, improved, whether that's transparency or accountability, or being able to generate those reports, being able to track, for audit purposes, or if it's federal funds versus, we're going to have that information. There's a module in the system that will help us improve those processes. All right. So, and then the big part, and this is my last slide here, is kind of the end user training strategy. This is going to be something that once we get closer to the go live date, we have a lot of end user training that we need to do. At this point, we have those key stakeholders involved with the project, because we're really talking about processes, and we're talking about, what information and how information flows. But we also realize that there's going to be new capabilities that folks are going to be, who historically have not done any data entry into GEMS, something as simple as like a timesheet. Right now we do paper timesheets, and then it's turned into a central contact within a department, and then they do all the data entry into the system for uploading those hours, or it's sent to payroll, and payroll does that entry. We're going to be looking at rolling out electronic timesheets as an example. So we're going to have to train all of our staff on those specific components. And so again, we're going to have a lot of training objectives and change management. And we realize that everyone who comes into this may have a different skill set when it comes to technology. And so we need to make sure that we're providing that support and delivering the right amount of training to make sure, because again, our data is only as good as what's being entered into the system. So I think it's going to be really important that we roll out that training. And so we're going to be very active this year in getting the various departments and line staff up to speed in various specific elements to where they're going to be more engaged with the system. And one of the objectives that we mentioned before and the outcomes, again, is putting together an e-learning training program. So again, enhancements, it's something that we have not had with GEMS. It's usually someone, you know, who's been there using the system, helping to look at what I call over the shoulder training. So I'm sitting there with Justin and it's like, well, this is how you run the report. You answer these questions, you do that. That's what we do with the current system. We're going to have a more robust training program for any new employees that come into the county, and we'll be able to continue as part of the onboarding process to get folks trained up. And so that's another part of this project. And that concludes my quick presentation and just an update of where we're at with the project. And any questions?
Thank you, Ken. How is the security on this system? We kind of talked about that yesterday in the treasurer report meeting, but what's that like? Is it sort of set up the same way where you have a class of users and it sort of goes down from there?
Yes. We do have that. That was one of our priorities when we were even building the RFP. That was one of our top priorities, and any product selected was really going to be around security, because this is our central finance system. The one thing that I really like with the new system, because our old system, we didn't have the ability to set up levels of permission. You know, it's an older technology. So if you had access to GEMS, you know, how do you build in the various levels to make sure that if, you know, without giving admin rights to a system, you know, because there's workflows or certain parts of the system that, you know, that operationally or day-to-day work, I have no business being into that module, you know, as an example. And you know, so that is an important function. That is something that we've built into this. We have various levels of permissions that are established. So again, that if there's any changes or if we do things, we're able to audit that change and being able to go back and really identify, well, what changed, who made the change, and who approved the change. That's something that this new system is going to be much more robust than what we have currently.
Okay, wonderful. Commissioners, did you have any more questions? Commissioner Cooler?
I just wanted to say that I'm aware of how much work this is, and I'm aware that that for most people in the public, they're not gonna, they won't need to care. Not that they won't care, but that they don't really need to care. But that this is, I think, a perfect example of taking the time to do good government, of having that transportation, the transparency, and having those connections that we can see all the way through. And so I thank you, and I look forward to it being at some point for Mike and the team being easier. So I really appreciate this huge learning curve for all of you, and also the benefits in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of painstaking work to go from how we used to do things to how we should be doing things. So appreciate that.
I think Jennifer Elkins and I talked a little bit about this just in the course of a retirement party, and that the difference between having a stack of paper that you go through and having a query to the cloud is going to take some mental changes. And I just really appreciated the scale.
Yep.
And if I could, and I just really want to highlight, because in particular, Shane Hoffman, Mike Barnhart, Jen Elkins, because this is a central finance system, while I at times had the luxury that, you know, because I don't do accounts, AR or AP or some of these other elements. So you know, I'm able to kind of balance things because I'm more involved with the budget and maybe the procurement and some of these other areas, that we have certain stakeholders that are able to you know, have a little more options on whether or not they need to be at that meeting or not, or that presentation or not. But Mike and Jen and Shane are three of our key staff that they don't have that luxury, because this is the central finance system, and they have to be involved in with all of those meetings. And so I would be remiss if I didn't like specifically call, you know, those three out, you know, in particular. And there's some key office managers also too. I'm thinking like HHS and some of the other departments. But again, Mike and Jen and Shane have been working really hard with our providers, and the number of meetings and the interactions that we have both with our consultant teams and with departments and with stakeholders and with training and keeping me updated. And so I can make sure that I'm prepared to give the board updates of where we're at. It's been a heavy lift, and we wouldn't be where we're at right now if not for their efforts. And that's an understatement, a significant understatement. They've been doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And it is exciting though to think about the end result and how much easier life will be too. So we're excited to see that. All right. Any other questions for Ken or anyone on the panel? No? Okay. Thanks, Justin. Mike.
Thank you for your support.
Appreciate it. Okay, so it looks like we're moving on to our work session. And today we have a work session, review and discussion of the ARPA Rural Broadband Consultant RFP. And Ken, are you going to tackle this one as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, you get to listen to me some more. But this will be much briefer. So per previous discussions that the board has had in some work sessions, and the direction and the idea was, let's put together an RFP to track down some consulting services to help. And there's really, and that's what I have is I sent to the board, and it's in the packet, a draft RFP. And so that breaks up the project. There's two deliverables that we're looking for from the consultants. The first one is to pull together all the available information and help prepare a plan and have those interactions with our local providers, with the board, with partners, to put together a plan on how best, where there's need, how best and what strategies would be available to best implement some expansion in those underserved areas, or enhance if there is existing access, how can we enhance that to actually get it up to a much better level. And then the second part of so there's the plan component, and then the second part is to develop a plan for a grant program to then get our ARPA funds out to providers through awarding grants for either a project or multiple projects to help implement the outcomes of that plan. I think it's it's an ambitious scope of work. But at the same time, the board has identified funds from the ARPA allocation, and then we also have the state funds that were identified from Senator Boquist to support this work. So here's again, I wanted to bring the draft RFP and ensure that the board is comfortable with the scope of work and what we're looking for.
Great, thank you. So this is not my expertise by any stretch. So I'm curious, because we've asked, like Online Northwest, what would you do if you were given these funds? How would you expand? Are we looking strictly for consultants that are not interested in bidding on any of that work, or does it not matter? Or how are we sort of separating that? And do those consultants even exist? I'm assuming they do. But are we going to make a distinction there so that we sort of separate the conflict maybe in the future?
Well, because there are consultants who do this work that aren't necessarily aligned, with a specific provider. And one of the things that you may recall is when we did the RFI last fall, we got some pretty extensive proposals on what each one. So we're really going to be looking for a consultant that's going to be able to gather the expertise, gather the information to help put together, because like we said before, I'm not an expert on this area. Based on the RFI, I couldn't tell you if one responsive document was better than the other responsive document. And they also all had some pretty high dollar amounts associated with it. So then how do you make that determination or that evaluation? There are consultants. I've got at least one name that was provided to me that, because we'll advertise through our typical channels for all RFPs, but then we'll also send some information to folks that we know of have done similar plans for other counties or other jurisdictions, and just advise them that, hey, we've released this RFP, and then hopefully they'll respond to the document or respond to the RFP and give us a proposal.
Okay. Commissioners, any thoughts? Commissioner Starrett?
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions, and thank you, Ken and Christian, for this. I wanted to know if we were going to be including, even though we don't have any specific information, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act regarding broadband. So you've got 74 million for rural broadband, and then that 1 billion for middle mile, and we don't know a dollar amount. But are we keeping sort of a placeholder for that so that we could expand whatever project we do wind up getting? And then the other one was, are we taking into consideration data that any prospective providers have already gathered in this, and COG as well? Yes,
all the above. I think the one important part of this is it's putting together a plan, and then the second element was putting together the specific grant program, which is specific to the ARPA funds that we have. But the nice part is we will also have a plan that should other funding opportunities or other grants come available, that now we have some direction. We have a path forward on how best to apply those funds, or even if additional resources were to come available, it could be rolled into the additional amounts that we have identified already for infrastructure projects or on the ground projects. So it's kind of all the above. We're kind of looking at, I think that's the biggest part, was having that plan, to then being able to implement that plan. So should other funding opportunities come available, at least we have a path forward on some possible opportunities on where to direct those funds. And reviewing the materials and the submittals from the RFI is going to be an important part of this project, because we already have some of that data from some of our area providers that they've already submitted to us.
Would COG be part of that final review?
It could be. Because I think that's going to be the other part, is this consultant's going to need to identify not only existing providers, but potential providers, other partners, other planning efforts that may be, underway, being able to identify that, because if there's any partnership or overlays with other areas of the county that, could partner with, because, most of the ISPs aren't confined to a specific county. So there might be more regional type projects that may come out of this as well.
And Ken, the cost of the consultant is coming out of the bucket of money that we've already allocated. Okay.
Correct. I looked at it that we have our direct allocation. I still haven't received a grant agreement from DOS for the other funds. So, I'm envisioning that the consultant costs will come out of the allocation, the ARPA allocation for the rural broadband. And then, because it's not going to be the full amount, obviously. So a portion of that will pay for the consultant services, and then anything, the remaining funds will be held aside for grants and projects. And then the state funding from Senator Boquist, that for this rural broadband will be added to that project implementation funds.
Okay, Commissioner Kula.
Yeah, I just wanted to send a strong support for Ken's description of having a plan that puts our money to the best use for people in the county, and not just for the businesses who submitted ideas, but then also to have a plan for further funding. You know, Jody Christensen is regularly reaching out with, hey, there's this, and hey, there's this, and our Senate delegation says, hey, the USDA has this, and we never have a way to pull it into a plan that we as representatives of our community want, rather than what businesses want. And even though I know that we need to, that money will end up going to a business to help them install infrastructure. So I think this is a good next step in the process, and thank you. And I will say that it also was fairly readable.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you also felt that way.
Yes, good points. The other thing, and I was talking to Ken and Christian about this, but it was in one of our magazines that we get in our inboxes, but I was glancing through it, and one rural community decided that because we've been having this conversation of, we don't have very much money to do this, so are we going to, do a fourth of the work and then it doesn't really get there, just because it costs so much money. But they did what they called a tech hub. So it was an actual building that was situated in sort of a central location where they outfitted the whole building with the capabilities that folks were needing. And it was kind of a central hub where everybody came to. So interesting idea. Obviously it has its own setbacks in terms of, who staffs it, who maintains it long-term. But I'd love to see some of those, outside of the box ideas to come out of this. That'd be pretty interesting to see, whether that would work in Sheridan in conjunction with the school or anything like that. That would be kind of neat to see as well. So
I seem to recall, Chair, too, that the USDA, some of their programs where there's like a small area that needs good support, you actually have to pledge a building that's open to the public that has that capability within it. And people have been like, okay, will a post office work? I talked to a man outside of Lafayette where they have terrible internet, and he said, I'll let people use my shed if that's what it takes.
right. Okay, well, thank you, Ken, for all the work that was put into that. And then so that'll go out and live here in the next week or so.
Correct, because I'm not really looking for, I think if there's consensus of the board to proceed, then I'll work with county counsel's office and we'll get this RFP out and start the process. And I'm looking at, because again, looking at the deadlines and timelines associated with ARPA funds, I want to make sure that it's a pretty ambitious schedule. So definitely want to get the RFP open. And so hopefully we can get a consultant service to help come in and start working on the plan.
Sounds great. Commissioners, we're all on the same page, ready to move forward? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, that is the end of our work session. We are going to move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. And we are moving on to old business. Let's see, what time is it? 11 o'clock. Okay, moving on to old business. Item H1 is consideration of approval of processing marijuana applications through the Type B procedure. And this has been continued from December 23rd of 2021. And I believe we are inviting Ken Friday. Yep, there he is. Great. So I will kind of, I guess, recap. We had a previous discussion about this back in December. And there were some, and the point would be to add some extra reassurance to the public that when these particular applications come in for marijuana processing, that they would follow a certain procedure through the planning department. Right now, it appears that the planning department just voluntarily does them through a certain application, what they call the type B application. But a suggestion was made by a resident in our county that that be codified essentially, so that we would direct the planning department to do that in every case. After that discussion, I reached out to the Farm Bureau and also the Property Owners Association, just to make sure that I wasn't missing anything in terms of unintended consequences. And they really didn't have much, except for perhaps the distinction between the size of the facility. And their suggestion was that if the facility is considered a small facility, so under 2,500 square feet, then maybe not mandate that you use a type B, but anything over that would be considered a large facility, and that seemed fine with them. That would be codified, since we're doing that as our best practice anyway. So can we have a memo from you that basically just spells out, what we've already talked about, that you are following that procedure? Can you clarify though that that distinction, would that work if you had what a small facility versus a large one, and would that be good for you as well?
Yes. Oh, yes. I do completely agree with that. Commissioner Kula had sent me the House Bill 2844 that talks about that, and the facility that seems to have started all this off of Jakewith Road was 3,500 square feet. That was going to be inside a 10,000 square foot building. So that's one of the reasons why I put it down as a type B. And just to give a little bit of background, the type A is where we get in an application, they give us their design, we review it, put down any conditions on it, and then the planning director, me, issue a decision, and then people have 15 days to appeal that. And typically that's the first time that a neighbor would know about it. The type B process has notice mailed out to neighboring property owners and allows them 15 days to look at the proposal, to make comments on it, and they can request a hearing before the Planning Commission. It costs them $250 to request that hearing before the Planning Commission, but and then any issue that comes out of the decision, that can then be appealed to the Board of Commissioners. So because marijuana is a new crop, and well, not a new crop, new legal crop for Oregon, and because with the Jakewith Road property, we had previous code enforcement issues, and it was a big facility. So all of those led me to do it as a type B application. And really, I've been doing all the marijuana processing facilities as type B applications. Commissioner Kula, just right before the hearing, sent me 4 questions. And if it's okay, I'll just go through those questions. And my understanding is these are kind of questions from the Farm Bureau. Is there an added cost for type B relative to type A? And the answer is no. Our site design review process has one fee, and it remains the same whether we process it as type A or type B. Second question, is there added time for type B to type A? And the answer is yes, there can be added time. As I have described, there's a 15-day additional period where notice is sent out, and there's a potential for someone to request a hearing before the Planning Commission, and then appeal going to the Board of Commissioners. And so that can add additional time to the process. Question number 3, what type of process or applications get the most complaints? You know, from what I've seen, it really depends on the neighborhood as much, if not more, than the type of request. We've had marijuana processing facilities go in south of Dayton and go through the type B process and have not had any concerns from neighbors. We've also had wineries along Warden Hill Road that were permitted uses, and in spite of the fact that they were permitted uses, neighbors were adamantly opposed to the winery and the wine processing there. So, personally, I believe it depends somewhat on the expectations of the neighbors and what they believe should be allowed in their neighborhood. And some folks just don't seem to be aware that they are in a farm zone or in a farm forestry zone, and the types of uses that can go on in those zones. And really, the farm and farm forestry zone can sometimes be more like a light industrial zone than the bucolic, just a couple of cows out in the field. So yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the neighbors and neighborhoods and what they think should be there. The last question is, should we consider doing type B for all processor site design reviews? And my answer would be no. The board can certainly consider it, and I want to make it clear that I'm not proposing that they all be type B applications. Even a type A application, you still are sending out notice and letting someone know that there's a use going on. I just think the type B helps us to discern if there's additional things to consider when we're making the decision. And when it's a new type of farm use, I don't think it's inappropriate to go through a type B process. So those are my initial comments. And any questions?
So Ken, just to clarify type A versus type B, when the public announcement goes out and there's a process for appealing or opposing, does the $250 fee come into play just in type B, or is it in type A as well?
Type A as well. So
okay.
There's a $250 where you can request a hearing before the Planning Commission. If the decision's already been made, there's $250 where you can appeal it to the Board of Commissioners. And frequently we will have discussions at the counter when someone says, well, I want this to go to the Planning Commission. And we'll say, well, what are your concerns? And if their concerns are something that we can address in conditions, we'll try to say, well, you can do that, but we can do these types of conditions, talk to the applicant about it, and kind of talk them out of going to the Planning Commission unless it's something that they just want to oppose it all the way. There is, the $250 is our standard fee for either one.
Okay, but it seems like overall type B is a bit more punitive in terms of the timeline and the wait time for the applicant, for sure.
Well, I like to think of it as getting better information and making the decision. It's not intended to be punitive, but it actually, it can take more time to go through that process.
Okay. Commissioner Kula, I think you had your hand up. Or Commissioner Starrett, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Friday. A question about a clarification on the fire inspections, not sort of blanketing all ag buildings. One of the concerns, obviously my biggest concern, was about the flammable nature of any kind of processing in that capacity. So can you just clarify that would not relate to all ag buildings?
Yeah, I somehow got the impression from the newspaper article that I was proposing that every ag building should have a fire inspection. I was not proposing that at all. Just if it has a something that is a processing facility where something could be considered flammable, then I think it might not be a bad idea to get a fire inspection. And right now, there's not a requirement to do so if you're in the farm zone.
So would we be able to add that requirement since it's not a requirement currently?
I think you'd have to go to the legislature to do something like that because it's in the building code. And if it is a farm use on a farm, I don't think there's a way that we can require them to get the fire inspection. I think it's something that you'd have to have done at the legislature, and I appreciate that you had tried to do that at one point, and I believe the Farm Bureau was in opposition to that, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that was the essence of one of the components of the bill, and they were opposed to that. I was disappointed, but
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Kula.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I can forward the email from Dave Honeycutt if you want to hear a blast on that particular issue.
Yeah,
like,
and I asked him the same thing, and it was quite involved, his response, but basically was that it's part of the building code, and the fire can't supersede that. You can't come in and do that. I thought it was interesting, though, that if there is a use of chemicals, that OLCC is actually the route that you go to make complaints, or if you have concerns or whatever, it would be through OLCC versus the county. So I thought that was interesting. It was also stated that, as you're going through the permitting of this and the setup of this, OLCC comes in, OSHA comes in, ODA comes in. So you have all these entities that come in to oversee, what you're doing. So it didn't sound like there was an avenue to do that. And obviously you've had that experience. I guess, Commissioner Kula, we've had this discussion, and my concern is always the slippery slope of, what's next, right? Are we going to extend this to like a hazelnut processing facility on a farm because they're loud, or, they're ugly, or whatever? Do you have those concerns about this, or do you feel comfortable with this?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I will say, full disclosure, declare a potential conflict of interest since I am a farm landowner. 2 pieces, in fact, these days, which is very exciting. But to the extent that the Type B procedure is required for all of just one crop type, that's something I'm uncomfortable with because of question 3 that I had for Ken, which is why marijuana processor site design reviews exclusively when Commissioner Bershauer, you have heard the hearings, but Commissioner Sarah and I have been at them where folks who are next door to other processors have a great deal of passion about the impacts, real impacts that they are of being in a farm zone. And those are not, only one of them in the case of my tenure on the Board of Commissioners has been a cannabis processor. The others have been wineries. We did have the bakery, but the opposition was different than, I think that Ken would probably agree that was a different level of opposition, right? It wasn't really their neighbors who were concerned. And so I would say that since I've seen, I guess the essence of this, and Ken probably understands, even though we might have differences of opinion about it, is that what I hear from neighbors is that when they're upset, they express, why didn't I hear about this before it was approved? And that's kind of regardless of where the processor is or what type of processor it is. If they didn't hear about it before it was approved, they get upset, right? And so the Type B procedure is intended, my understanding is to do that announcing before you do the decision. And that process and the emotions, the real emotions and the real impacts are there regardless of the crop. And so from my perspective, if we're going to mandate Type B procedures for one crop, when we've had one complaint that's driving it, that's inappropriate when I know that wineries have had the same level of concerns expressed. You've already approved this, and now we have to appeal it. And so my kind of position right now is either we do all Type B for all site design reviews, or we continue to maintain the status quo, which is to give Director Friday discretion. And I'm leaning towards discretion. Thank you.
Commissioner Kula. I would agree. I sort of feel like this is a solution to a problem that doesn't necessarily exist, because we've already given Ken the leeway to make those decisions, right, and have that discretion. And I really am worried about the slippery slope, because, you know, I mentioned hazelnut processing, and full disclosure, my husband is a hazelnut farmer. We don't own a farm, but there's a lot of a lot of propane used in that process, and it's highly flammable, and there's other issues that come into play. So if it was an all or nothing, I really think that would harm a lot of our farmers and growers. So I'm not comfortable with codifying something that doesn't seem to be an issue. You know, if we run into this in the future and we start having issues, we can readdress it. But I agree, Commissioner Cool. I'm going to err on the side of caution, because that slippery slope argument, it bothers me that we could get into that position. So, Commissioner Sterrett, did you want to add anything?
Thank you. And I do appreciate both of your comments on carving out this one particular type of processing, because I understand that virtually any kind of processing of anything, you've got inherent risks. But I think in this particular case, I would want to err on the side, and I do appreciate that our planning director has typically used the type B procedure when he didn't have to. So I appreciate that. The only upside of sort of making this formal and making a sort of directive to the planning department is that we know, and people know, that should this type of processing be applied for, that this would be the process that we would use universally. So that's why I would be in favor of it, but I can count. And I see that I'm outnumbered here. I'm no stranger to that whole thing. So I get what you're saying. I would totally understand, but I would err on the side of wanting to give the planning department the leeway to basically use this as their default. So I know there's a motion to direct the planning director to process all applications for processing marijuana through the type B. And I don't know whether we want to let it die a natural death and not bring this as a motion. I would prefer to, but since I can count, I don't know that it would get me where I want to go on getting this type B sort of locked in, but I'll leave it up to you, Chair.
Thank you. Did we have a motion that was from the 23rd? I can't remember if we actually made a motion that carried over.
I don't know that we made the motion. I think you
Okay.
pulled it, or somebody pulled it so we could have the planning director there. So I don't know that it's anything we need to undo.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I feel that, you know, Ken, you're aware of our concerns, and you're certainly aware of the community's concerns. And we handle these things in a case-by-case basis very carefully. And I feel that there are adequate avenues to appealing or coming forward and saying, you know, we don't feel this is safe. So I think we just continue doing what we're doing, and allow Ken Friday that discretion, and move forward.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Thank you,
good.
Ken.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it looks like we are moving on to old business H2, which is consideration of approval of the 2022 Yamhill County Board of Commissioners areas of liaison and responsibilities. And this was continued from last week, January 6th, 2022. And I'm pulling up my list. I believe the only changes that we made were the changeover of the chair responsibilities, so administration to me, and then Commissioner Kula applying for the Willamette Falls Locks position. And I believe those were the only two. Is that correct, Commissioner Sterrett?
I just wanted to call out, and this would just be at the discretion of the chair, The only thing is that I had been the liaison for emergency management. And what happened back, just historically, when Alan Springer was the chair, is he was basically looking at what your area of interest and involvement in the community was prior to you becoming a commissioner. So for instance, I wound up by default with Health and Human Services because of the social service aspects of my involvement in the community. And since I have a background as an emergency responder, that was something that he just saw on my resume and said, okay, we're going to give you emergency management. So I've typically been working with that. And then also historically with our former emergency manager, I had said, hey, we don't have an emergency alert system, notification system here in the county. So I remember sort of trying to resurrect that and get that thing through the process. And that's what happened. And so I became involved in getting that pushed forward. That is my involvement with it. I know it comes under the auspices of the sheriff's office now, whereas before it might not have. So I would just say that would be the only difference. And I know it comes under your liaison duties now, Chair, and it's up to you.
Okay, so just for clarification, I must have an old list because I have emergency management under administration, but I have veteran services under human health and human services. So are you interested in keeping emergency management and pulling it out of administration?
No, I just wanted to call out that was historically why I wound up with it. And Ken looks like he's ready to comment.
Yeah, the part, because that was a holdover also because at one point emergency management was actually part of administration. It was a standalone division, but it reported directly to the county administrator. This is years ago, but organizationally that changed and falls under the sheriff, and Brian Young reports to the sheriff. And so that was one, we wanted to make sure that was available for discussion, because again, it's up to the board on what you would like to do. If you know, a lot of times we'll make those streamlining. Same thing goes with veteran services as well. Getting in the Wayback Machine. You know, veteran services used to also be another one that was a standalone division that fell under the administration umbrella, but that was moved to HHS. And so there's been times in the past where veteran services had a different liaison than the liaison to HHS. I'm thinking, I believe both Stan and Rick previously, because they were veterans, and there was an interest in them, you know, and wanted to stay connected. So sometimes with those organizational changes, we try to, you know, make those adjustments, but again, it's completely up to the board on how they do that. It just kind of streamlines things for that department head. You know, some divisions have more interactions with their liaison. Other departments, you know, it really goes through. The division manager might not have that direct connection. It's with the department head. And so sometimes it can create some confusion if, you know, in emergency management, if, you know, the sheriff having two liaisons, or how that kind of, but again, it's completely 100% up to the board on how you want to, if you want to carve out certain divisions or keep certain divisions.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Well,
I'm fine with it staying with the sheriff's liaison. That's okay. I'll just have to get a hold of Sergeant Young and tell him we got to break up.
oh, funny.
Well, Chair, I do think that Brian Young and I and Andrew Phelps, the emergency management director, I think he's going to be a director soon since it's a separate division or department, have talked a lot about Cascadia events. And I will say that I think it would be wise to have the chair, at least for this year, the chair to also be the liaison, just in case.
Oh,
Okay.
don't say that. Don't say
right.
that, please.
Well, I'm just planning ahead. We plan ahead so that we don't need it.
We don't need it. No, I agree. I will go ahead and we'll hand that off to our chair, and thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, step one is I need a new list because this is definitely old. Although it's dated January of last year, but Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, let's see. We need a motion for this, right?
Chair, I was going to ask if there are some confusions, we could hold it over, but I know that departments like to know.
Yeah, I think we're there, hopefully. So I will make a motion to approve the 2022 Yamaha County Board of Commissioners areas of liaison and responsibilities. With the proposed change of Commissioner Kula serving on the Willamette Falls Locks Commission. Sound good? Okay. So there's a motion to approve. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okie dokie. Let's see. So I think we're running pretty close to on time, 11:20. Okay, sounds good. So we are moving on to other business. And our first item is consideration of approval of recommendations for the Yamaha County Water and Sewer Infrastructure Grant. And I believe we have Carrie Martin joining us, as well as Pat Evans, who served on the Water and Sewer Recommendation Committee.
And while they're
Perfect.
joining, if you'd like, while they're in the process of joining, I can, just in the interest of, so folks know, this water and sewer infrastructure grant program is part, again, one of the elements of the county's direct allocation of our ARPA funds. And it's, as per the Treasury guidelines, one of the eligible expenses under that is water and sewer infrastructure. Based on previous discussions with the board wanted to make the $6.8 million of that allocation available to support investments in water and sewer infrastructure projects. And so Carrie Martin, our grants and special projects manager, put together the program, which the board approved, and we did a solicitation. We got applications, and we had a review committee that reviewed the applications and provided the scores, and you have the recommendation before you. So just kind of wanted to set the stage a little bit and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Ken. Yes, and welcome, Carrie, and welcome, Pat. I think it was evident to everybody as we were going through this that, whoa, this was a lot of work, and it took a lot of time to do this. So thank you, Carrie, for all of your time that you put into this. And Patrick, you served on the Citizen Recommendation Committee, and that committee was Steve Caldwell, Pat, Greg Hafner, Elliot Rector, and Ryan Webb. And so we thank them for all of the time, because they had to go through all of these applications and forth through them and score them all. So a ton of work, and we really appreciate your input and your time. So I want to open it up to thoughts from commissioners. We've all had a chance to review the list, and it looks like there were, was it 28 projects total? We had 29 applications. One was rejected for other reasons, but 28 total valid applications. And we got through 23 of them in terms of funding. I really, as I was going through this, I really love how widespread we were able to get money into all corners of the county. That was really impressive. I have one question that's on my list, and the question was about the partial funding of MAC Water and Lights infrastructure application. So they asked for $1 million, and then we are funding partially $376,000 and some change. And how that decision was made, when you put it up next to, say, the city of Carlton, that was asking for an infrastructure grant of that same amount, where we could fully fund something from the city of Carlton. So Carrie, I don't know if you want to dive into that, or Pat, if you had some thoughts, if you guys had a discussion about that, but it seemed like they ranked about the same in terms of the score between those two projects. So I was just curious if there was a reason why one was chosen over the other.
Sure. And just to clarify, there was no meeting of the committee after they individually scored. So I tallied everything that they put together and then put forth the recommendations. For the implementation category that you're referring to, there was a tie for the last place, the 13th place, that was going to be able to be funded. And that was between a Carlton implementation program and then also for Mac Water and Light for $1 million. The only reason that I put forth Mac Water and Light was because they have a much larger potential impact. And that was one of the original criteria, but also because they were the sole third phase project that was put forward. And so it gave us some diversity in terms of how projects might be completed, and so that we didn't have everything in the planning or just through purchases. So they were a phase 3, but as you pointed out, they had the exact same score as Carlton, and so that would be certainly a reasonable conversation.
Okay, and do we remember if that was Carlton's, was it proposal number 3 or 4 that tied for 13th? And what was that project? Do you recall? I was trying to find it, but I couldn't quite nail it down.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look.
Okay, because they have two, one's for 325, one's for 375. So, technically we could fund either one of them, but I was just curious if there was one or the other that was
It was
tied.
the lower dollar amount. I think it might be the 325.
Okay. Commissioners, while we're kind of looking into that, do you have some initial thought, Mr. Starrett?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to when I made the remarks about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money that would be coming for rural broadband. The same thing, there is some money coming for infrastructure and rural water projects. And whether or not we could say, okay, let's say we do wind up with a chunk of money forthcoming from that pot of money, would we be able to say something didn't get funded, but that's going to be first on our list should we get money from a rural water project federal funding? And I don't want to put anybody on just basically say, okay, you're going to have to be waiting in terms of that ever happening if it doesn't. But I just want to make sure that that would be a pot of money we would use for whatever didn't get funded.
Sure. Commissioner Kohler?
Oh, I just wanted to get some clarification. Are we applying for more federal money?
No, I'm saying, no, if there is more money forthcoming, that we would be able to at some point down the line say, okay, you didn't get funded this time. We've got something that it might, it might not be ever, or it might not be for a length of time. But if there is more money for that we consider people who didn't get funded this round.
I would probably just, kind of say that any additional funds that may come available, from various resources, I think anything that if, like we've been kind of through the pandemic, we've had various types of funding resources, whether that's coming through the state or coming from the federal government for various programs, that if we had, if I received notification that, hey, there's some funds specific for category broadband, for infrastructure, that information, I'd be coming and having a conversation with the board. And then you're right, if the board were to say, well, we want to take a portion of these funds, or we want to apply these funds again to the existing water and sewer infrastructure grant and fund additional projects, that's a decision that the board could make at that time if we had additional funds coming in to do that. So again, I think it would be a discussion that I would more than likely, if I got notice from the state or if there was another grant opportunity, that we'd come before the board and say, hey, we've got some more water and sewer infrastructure. we've already got projects identified, but can we add it to the 6.8 million that was identified of our direct allocation and fund more projects? I think that is a possibility.
From an administrative point of view, because these are all, excuse me, through the portal, this would be a very easy thing to do. All of their applications are already online, all their contact information, so we could reach out very easily.
Okay. And then were you able to find, Carrie, that the number or the project description?
325.
So
is
325.
yeah.
And what's kind of the general summary of what that would be? Are we talking about water lines that are, Main Street, or Pat, do you recall when you were scoring some of the projects from City of Carlton? Oh, you're muted.
I'm afraid I don't, Commissioner, because there was no opportunity to download those scores once we had completed them.
I see. Thank you. I guess that would be my concern, is just the weighing, Mac Water and Light's ability to go after more money, to go after larger grants, as opposed to the City of Carlton. That's a very small town, and full disclosure, I live there, but I'm concerned because if you've ever driven through there in the past year or two, it's kind of like that movie Cars, where Mater drives on the road that's all messed up. You have to hold your coffee to make sure it doesn't spill when you're driving through Carlton. So, and it's not because we just don't want to pave the roads, it's because of the water infrastructure needs that are underneath the road. So I want to make sure that we're, if Mac Water and Light has the ability to go after more funds, we're already giving them, $550,000, and yet Carlton is around 200. Are we breaking that up to the point where it's a little bit more fair in terms of the ability of the city to go after more funds?
Commissioners, this is the Headworks upgrade project for Carlton.
Headworks,
for
okay.
For 325.
Commissioner Kula, what are your thoughts? Because you really kind of convened everybody in the beginning and had these discussions. Do you have any thoughts about this particular issue?
Yeah, well, I do have the question of I don't know who Chehalem Springs Association or Chehalem Water Association is, so I'd love to get more information on that. And Carrie, can you share that? And then I did want to note that are these there's a group that has emailed me multiple times about groundwater monitoring. So I just want to ask if they ever submitted anything. I'm sorry, that's off topic.
I don't recall seeing any groundwater monitoring, but remember, this was only open to special districts and municipalities. So the Chehalem is a special district, and that is the extent of my knowledge.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. I'm just wondering, Carrie mentioned that there's a larger potential impact with the city of McMinnville, or sorry, McMinnville Water and Lights application, and I recognize that, and I also on the kind of the flip side of that, if we're thinking about impact and the number of water users, I'm assuming Chehalem Springs Association has fewer members than other relative to the amount that they're receiving, and so if we're thinking about that as an additional criteria in us making decisions, I think that's an important thing to just put out there, is how many water users are affected by this. And I will say, just to complicate it, on the flip side, commissioners, we've discussed regularly that we've wanted this money to go out to smaller communities that have a harder time accessing other sources of funds, and that potentially they can use this as their seed money or their starter money or their funding to get other funds going. So I just want to throw in a little bit of nuance or grease or monkey wrench or whatever into this conversation. I think overall, I really appreciate how spread out around the county the funding was. So that's my one appreciative starting thought, and how much work has been done on it. But I had those concerns about what are we as commissioners, what are we trying to do with this beyond just how good was the proposal?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Cooley. I appreciate that. That's kind of why I had those thoughts about, weighing Mac Water and Light versus the city of Carlton. It looks like Chehalem Springs Water Association is a surrounding water district that surrounds Newburgh. There's several. So it definitely appears to be a smaller water district. Commissioner Sterrett, did you have a thought?
Just a couple of things about Mac Water and Light, and they have really been instrumental in working with a number of cities, including Newburgh, in terms of sort of the fallback and the big player in being able to assist smaller districts with significant needs. So I recognize that piece, but then I also recognize if you talk about the Carlton aspect, that their ability to raise the significant amounts of dollars that are needed for any of the projects, and their projects are critical. So I understand that piece, but I also understand that Mac Water and Light's been there for a number of different districts, but now Carlton is now in a position to receive funding for that would move the needle in their case. So I don't know how you make that call.
Ken?
If just a thought and a recommendation on how you could proceed. If the board has questions, because we essentially had a tie between, in the scoring criteria that the committee, that in total, we had a tie between Mac Water and Light and Carlton, and there's discussion about which one. One thought or a path moving forward, if the board would like to consider approving all of the projects minus that one, and then what you could do is then the board could see the applications for each project, and then you could handle that as a separate. So essentially you could approve the list of projects except for the Mac Water and Light award, and you could have that as a later discussion. And then if there's questions or if there's materials that the board would like to see, like the applications and what was submitted to the project specific, we can get that information to the board. So then that way you can make an informed decision. Again, this is a recommendation that came forward, so it's up to your approval. And so I just thought as a way in moving forward, because I know we're kind of scrambling going into the folders and trying to answer questions on those two individual applications. And so I just wanted to put that out there as a recommendation to keep moving forward. And so administratively, we can start getting grant agreements and check requests and everything else ready for these other projects.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. I think I really would like to move forward today. So I hope my colleagues are on the same page there, but I just thought it was, worth discussing that particular item. And I don't know if we know, for the Mac Water and Light proposal for $1 million, is that something where they had the rest of it and they consider that matching funds, so they just needed this extra piece? Or if if the city of Carlton, if that was their full ask, or if they already have matching funds, or if they would have to go seek them. I'm not sure if we know all those details, but I suppose we could pull that one out. I hate to slow any of it down because I think all of it's critical. So the other question I had was, and Pat, I don't know if you remember as you were going through these, and because obviously the Chehalem Springs Water Association ranked first, and even though the total dollar amount isn't very large, they had 3 proposals, but they seem to come in first. Does that ring a bell as to why that was critical in your eyes?
Well, commissioners, it seemed to me, if I can recall correctly, that the criteria that I personally was using, and I can't speak for any of the other reviewers, was whether or not the level of urgency and potential public health issues. I think this was one where they were having collapse of some of their pipes and their feeds. That, if I'm correct, Carrie, That is what moved it to the top for me because of the potential public health aspect of it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Just as a matter of process, if the commissioners would like to take a look at the full application, we also have the scoring that was provided by each of the reviewers. And then I've asked them to make comments. So if they, as to the rationale behind a particular score. So you'll be able to see that if you would like to review that for the position 13. It's hard to remember the specific details of 28 separate proposals. So, so I commiserate with Pat, but we can certainly provide that if you'd like to review it.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further thoughts? Commissioner Kula, does that help a little bit in terms of knowing what Chehalem Springs is and where they are and maybe what the needs were?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Commissioner
Yeah,
Starr,
I
any further
recognize that
thoughts?
with these smaller, the smaller the rate base, the more challenging it is to do the real basic beyond maintenance level work. And sometimes that's because the rates are not high enough, but sometimes it's because there are things happen, right? Many
Sure.
water systems that I've worked on, things happen.
Okay. You know, I really think this is very impressive. And again, you know, thank you, Carrie and Patrick and the team for all the work that was put into it. My only drawback is, or holdback is the city of Carlton versus the Mac Water and Light piece. You know, given what, you know, we're sending to the city of Amity or the city of Dayton, even, you know, even Newburgh, I feel like it's not quite as balanced as I was hoping to see in terms of infrastructure needs. And I know because I live there, but we all know because we've heard it between the city of Yamhill and the city of Carlton, and there's some pretty significant water infrastructure needs there. So my preference would be to move forward with the list with the amended amendment that we switch those two projects from Mac Water and Light to the other one that was from the city of Carlton that came in at the same rank score. Commissioner Kula?
Yeah, I would say that I'm happy to make a motion that we approve the water and sewer infrastructure grant proposals as evaluated and presented to us, swapping out the Carlton project for the McMinnville Water and Light project. With all due respect to McMinnville Water and Light's great value in the community.
Yes, absolutely.
That was part of the motion.
Okay, Carrie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, there will be a little bit of a balance remaining. So you might think about what you would like to do. If they'd like to leave it there and come back, there's not much.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be about 50,000 or so that would be remaining. Maybe we come back later if there's a one on the list that was further down, 24 through 28, if there's something that's around that size, maybe we can fund that. You know, and I do want to note too that we are intending to push this all out the door as quickly as possible. So even though half of this was meant for the next round of ARPA funds, we actually are going to get it all out the door right away. And so we'll be shifting a little bit going forward as we receive more ARPA funds in May. But I just want to make sure all commissioners are good with that we're going to unleash this money as fast as we can. Okay.
Yeah, and Chair, I just yes, exactly, okay. as quickly as possible. I realized too that when we're trying to decide between two projects that are tied, I do want to note that I don't recall us specifically identifying any of the interest from the American Rescue Plan money as having a particular destination. So if that's if the remainder plus interest from some versions of it, and Ken's going to start shaking his head, we could potentially fund both of them since they are a tie and we recognize the value of both of them. Sorry, Carrie, I totally messed it up.
The only caveat, because again, it's ultimately a board decision on how we handle the ARPA funds, but it's just I would just put the reminder out there that the 6.8 million is a portion of, some other, the LARP of $21 million, and realizing that we have nonprofit grants, childcare, impacted industries, and some other even some internal operational needs as well for some of these ARPA funds. And so I think anything that's not immediately awarded to a program, it might be good to have those funds available for later discussions should other priorities or other program areas come up, that then we could have a discussion about, well, we identified 6.8 million. But I'm just going to use round numbers, but we awarded 6.7 million. So then we know we have those funds available for other priorities and needs that may come up and I just, this is our first grant program that we're doing with the ARPA funds. And so I just want to be, cautionary and just deliberate that if we start awarding more, then that means some of the other priorities and other areas are now going to have less funds available potentially, or there may be other things that come forward that are even could be a larger priority than water and sewer infrastructure, so I just wanted to put that disclaimer.
But Commissioner Kula, I see where you're coming from. Maybe, and we talked about withholding a little bit for administrative costs, perhaps that has to come out of that amount too, but maybe it's that we just, if there's some residual, we come back a little bit later and say, okay, here's a thought for how we spend that money. But I think we're doing a good job on the bulk of it. So, okay, Commissioner Starrett, there's a motion on the floor. Do you have any further thoughts on that?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any further discussion, anybody? Okay. And just to review, the motion was from Commissioner Kula to approve the recommended list for the ARPA water and sewer infrastructure grants, with the exception and amendment of switching out the MAC Water and Light proposal number 4 with the City of Carlton proposal number 3, which is $325,000. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign, and motion passes. Again, thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Pat, for joining us. We really appreciate the time that was put into this.
Just as kind of a process improvement, I think the other part would be helpful is if, and maybe that can be a second motion, if the board would entertain authorizing the county administrator to authorize grant agreements for releasing the funds. So then that way we're not having to bring back the 24 grant agreements that we're going to be preparing.
Sure.
Just a request to kind of streamline.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we authorize the county administrator to sign grant agreements. Specifically for this or just for all of them?
Specifically for this, the water and sewer infrastructure.
Okay, specifically for the water and sewer infrastructure grant applications related to ARPA. Any discussion, commissioners? All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. And I know we touched on this kind of in our meeting this week, but in terms of the cash flow, you think we'll be fine in terms of, if we start rolling out some more of the grant awards, by the time May hits, we should be fine in terms of that flow.
So as part of the budget adoption process, we did, because we're anticipating that we're going to receive the second tranche of ARPA funds this fiscal year. So we budgeted that revenue and fully appropriated the full ARPA allocation in the the current year budget. So we're okay with appropriations and also with the timing, because it's going to take some time to do the check requests and the grant agreements and to get the actual funds out the door. So I'm not anticipating any issues budgetarily or appropriations and being able to handle these requests as they're coming in. Because again, we are fully appropriated our entire ARPA allocation to the current fiscal year. So we have expenditure authority for that.
Okay, sounds great. And Commissioner Kula, I just wanted to say thank you for your work early on in this particular part, because you brought everybody together, and that was a really eye-opening meeting that we had with all the cities to talk about their water infrastructure needs. And so I just want to thank you for your work on all that too.
Oh yeah, well, I will say the cities have been just amazingly helpful and welcoming to our congressional delegation too, and to our legislative delegation. So I really appreciate that they were willing to show, their water intakes. And we just got an email from Kenna West thanking us. So I want to say thank you for cookies, Kenna.
All right. Okay, so let's see. Where are we here? It looks like we are moving on to item I2, consideration of approval of the Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation Committee, or MWAT, appointments. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve those reappointments?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All opposed, same sign, and motion passes. Thank you. Item I3, consideration of authorizing position authority reallocating 1.0 FTE from corrections sergeant to a new support services manager position, program manager 4, in the sheriff's office. Do I have a motion to approve item I3?
So moved.
Okay, any discussion? Ken, any comments on this in particular?
No, I don't have any comments. It's a budgetary action adjusting FTEs within the budget.
Sure, okay. All right, all those in favor of item I3, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, item I4, consideration of approval of a grant application for the second Emergency Management Performance Grant Supplemental, EMPG-S, through the Oregon Office of Emergency Management in the amount of $46,943 for the grant period of April 1st, 2020 through December 31st of 2021. Do I have a motion to approve item I4?
Chair,
I move that we approve item I4. I
Okay,
could see that Commissioner Starrett was looking at me.
I was looking at you.
okay, further discussion on this particular item. All right, all those in favor of item I4 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay. It looks like we have item I5, which is consideration of approval of agreement number 173270 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority for the funding of choice model services in the amount of $196,669.94, effective upon approval through December 31st of 2022. Any discussion on this item? Commissioner Starrett.
Yeah, I would just move approval. This is to fund the care coordination at the local level for people with high mental health needs, keeping them at an independent level of living. So I would move approval.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. All those in favor of item I5 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, that moves us on to public hearings, I believe, if I have the right agenda. We're on public hearings. Okay. We have none, and that brings us to announcements. And I have a couple things. The first is I kind of missed the announcement, but Public Works put something out about Bell Road and the new speed signs that were installed there. So I just want to say thank you to Public Works and the Sheriff's Department, because they both worked together to get that done. And if you'll recall, we had a lot of citizen, not testimony, but signatures that were sent in by area residents who were very concerned about Bell Road. I used to drive that road every day, taking my son to school, so I know how dangerous it was. So it's just very impressive to see the sheriff work with Public Works and get something installed so quickly. So thank you very much for that. The other thing I have on my list is ODOT. Christian, were you able to connect with ODOT on the issue we've got there with the trail?
Yeah, I heard from this morning. He said he'd hope to have some additional information for us before the end of next week.
By the end of next week? Okay. Okay. And then the only other thing on my list was just kind of a recap of the treasurer's meeting yesterday. We have some members of the committee that are very involved in finance and the stock market and watching all of that stuff. And it was pretty eye-opening to hear their predictions of what's happening now and what they predict for the future. You know, some concerning things. Inflation is at around 7% now. They predict that we may see inflationary environment for the next 10 years or so. Maybe not that high, but definitely there. And then, you know, anticipating somewhat of a slowdown. Hopefully not a recession. Nobody wants that, but definitely a slowdown coming. So something to be aware of in terms of our budget, but also how we proceed, you know, with our next round of budgeting and discussions coming up here in April and May. So, but that was all on my list. Commissioner Sterrett, did you have any announcements you wanted to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, just to recap that we've asked that we have a convening of the Board of Health. It's going to happen next Wednesday. Folks will be able to listen, asking for a little bit of balance on some of the COVID information that the county puts out. And so we'll be hearing from a number of different people who might want to weigh in on that, and that'll be up on the website. The other thing is starting in July, there's going to be a new, it's a kind of like a 911, but it's 988, which is for suicide prevention and significant mental health issues. And the funding for this is going to come from, this is related to House Bill 2417, and that's going to give us some money for mobile crisis, and we'll be able to address that at the local level. And this is in the greater discussion that we've been having with a number of other groups on suicide prevention options in our community. So we'll be getting some money for that. There will be a 35 cent wireless fee, I believe, a tax on phone providers that will be a revenue stream for this. So that's going to be implemented in July. And that's all I have.
So how does that work the same way as 911, where you would just dial 988 and then it goes to some sort of central dispatch?
Yes, and it'll be central call center, mobile crisis response, and then crisis stabilization after that. And so the funding, will be getting some funding from the state to the county to help with that mobile crisis piece.
Okay. Wonderful. And then when did you say the rollout was?
July.
July. Okay. Great. And one thing real quick, I looked at the agenda for the Board of Health meeting. It kind of appears as though it's set up like a public hearing, and I know we didn't want that. I don't know if we can look at that agenda and see if maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but it appeared like it was a public hearing or a public meeting.
I know there's public comment typically at every Board of Health meeting. There's a time set aside. It's just a short amount of time. I think they have 5 or 10 minutes set aside for public comment, and they're not usually public comments at those meetings, but I know there's going to be some, there's been a request for written and for some comment, but what I've asked for is that a panel, putting together a panel, and they will have the significant amount of time to make their comments at that. So it wouldn't just be sort of people talking for the input from the county, the community, so much as this a panel of providers, doctors, different things like that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought I heard you say last time. So I was a little confused when I looked at it because it does look like it's just this public comment period. So hopefully we can get that hashed out on the agenda. Commissioner Pullen, did you, sorry, Ken?
I was just going to say, because I've looked at the agenda and there's a public comment period that was added to there, but then the agenda item is really they're convening to have this one discussion, which is on the website information. So that there's a line there. If I'm reading it correctly, it just looks a little different than our agendas on how the board sessions, but it's intended to be a open the session, public comment, and then the agenda item discussion. So
Okay.
I think that's the 3 elements to that meeting, and that was it.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because we've asked, this would be a panel discussion. In other words, we have presenters, we have some medical providers who are going to make presentations. And I mentioned to our Health and Human Services Director that there would be a number and that they would be limited to 5 minutes each so that they'd be able to just share their presentations. So I'll make sure I clarify that.
Okay, so Commissioner Starrett, your intention is that the panel would be that last section. It would be the bulk of the meeting where the panel is interacting with the Board of Health, or are we going to lump them into public comment?
No, the panel discussion would be separate from public comment.
Okay, understood. Commissioner Kula, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, that's the panel is public comment, is it not? Because
No.
this isn't a Board of Health driven decision, right?
No, what I'd asked for was that we have a panel of medical providers and researchers. That was what I brought up during our discussion last week. And then the recommendation is that we do this at a Board of Health meeting. So my email to our Health and Human Services Director was that I was going to, that there would be a panel of medical providers and researchers who would be limited to 5 minutes each, who would be making a presentation to the Board of Health, and that their discussion would follow that.
Okay.
That whose discussion?
There would be a panel of medical professionals and researchers who would make a presentation, and there would be a number of those, and then the Board of Health would have their discussion after that.
Oh, okay, so the Board of Health, yeah.
Yep, makes
Got
sense.
it.
Commissioner Kula, did you have further announcements or?
Yes, I'll have announcements. So I will be speaking, providing testimony to the Oregon Transportation Commission next Thursday morning, so just before commissioner meeting, because they're receiving testimony before determining where the flexible funding for the infrastructure project or the infrastructure bill goes within their funding streams. So that's mostly on behalf of the Parkway Committee. And then as a reminder, I sent to Carolina and Ken the tour details for the 3 Fridays in a row housing tours. And those are specifically designed to give the US Senate delegation a better sense of what's happening around housing, affordable housing, emergency shelters, and that transition between the two here in the county, and what barriers providers, owners, operators, realtors are experiencing. So they'll hear from Vicki Weibargen, for example, and apparently the U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley has already gone to Commons and seen it. So it's a good example of like, here's the follow through, here's what we're trying to do next. So join us if you are able and you have the details now. I think that was the main thing I wanted to make sure I told y'all about. And thank you.
Okay, Ken, Christian, any announcements? Nope. Alrighty, well, I think we've got a court security meeting, so we'll bug off here and jump onto that one, but thank you everyone. And this concludes the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners meeting for January 13th of 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you.